To be honest, guys, let's start with that. I'm sweating and I feel I'm a bit nervous, to be honest, because English isn't my native language. And well, the story you guys have to tell, I really want to get this feeling to my audience. So, well, thank you for being here at first.
You're welcome, and thank you for having us.
And sometimes I will try to find the great words, but it will work.
Well, can we try this? As you try and find the great words, if it's something that's really coming to you, can you just go in your natural language so that you can feel into what it is, and then we can translate from there if necessary?
Eldra, that's great. Oké. Ik zit hier, ik zal het even uitleggen, want dit is, nou ja, ik zei dat ik zenuwachtig was, en fijn, dat had je door. Ik zit hier met twee mannen. Nou, het zijn wel legends eigenlijk, dat mag ik wel zeggen. Wat zij hebben betekend en betekenen eigenlijk voor, nou ja, niet alleen de gevangeniswereld, want dan denk je misschien, oké, ik zet weg, want ik heb nog nooit in de gevangenis gezeten. Maar eigenlijk echt voor nou, mannenkracht is een onderwerp wat wel eerder besproken is in nou ja, andere KUKURU afleveringen. En daar hebben zij wat in te vertellen. Ze zijn hier in Nederland ook eventjes aan tour. Ze zijn geweest in een gevangenis in Zaanstad, als ik me niet vergis, waar ze de work gaan toepassen. En ja, wat dat is, daar ga je achterkomen. Ik vind het vooral ook voor jou en voor mij en voor mijn eigen ontdekkingsreis ben ik gewoon zo benieuwd hoe deze mannen ons kunnen helpen met, nou ja, de eigen gevangenis die we hebben gecreëerd om onszelf. En hoe je daaruit gaat en hoe je, we gaan veel van ze leren. So, what was I saying, Eldra? Because your Dutch is getting better and better.
Well, the Dutch is getting better and better. And I heard you speak about the potential of taking this work inside of the prisons here and how beneficial it may be and what the intention may be.
That's great.
That was the gist of it.
Yeah. And to be honest, I made it even bigger because, well, I don't think but not a lot of my viewers and listeners are working or being in prison for what other reason. But I think what you guys do is bigger, is for the whole world, for everybody.
Yes.
So, well, maybe I ask you yourself to do an introduction, because of course I can name some things, but I'm curious what you say about yourself. What's on your visit card, and how do you describe yourself? Eldra Jackson Dr.
How do I describe myself? I describe myself as first a lifelong learner, and someone who is a husband, a father, a son, a friend, and a submissive to spirit. There are other titles that go along with it: executive director of Inside Circle, facilitator, all of that, excuse my French, bullshit. But at the root, those are the things that I really am and what I feel in my soul.
Wow. That's a great introduction of yourself. Same question to you, Dr. James Mcleary. Hij is, I have to say something Dutch again. En we hebben het over een documentaire die heet The Work. Ik hoop echt dat je hem gezien hebt. Zo niet, ga hem checken. Dat gaat over waar wij het hier vandaag over hebben. En dit is de producer van The Work. Sorry.
Thank you for having me. I think I would describe myself as someone who's quite curious and interested in life. And that curiosity was born out of having dyslexia and it not being diagnosed. And so there was a drive on my part to understand. And I also wanted to understand people. I saw cruelty in the world, and I didn't really understand why people were hurting each other as much as they were. I knew the circumstances, but underneath all that, how does one compartmentalize their humanity to hurt someone else's humanity?
Yeah.
So,
and if I ask you this question now, that's a big question, of course, but why do people hurt, do you think?
Well, I think I'm also a clinician, so part of what I see is people's traumas. Something happened to them early on in their life, and people develop strategies not to be hurt by that same thing again. And the older one gets, the more sophisticated the strategy. And so what happens is that strategy comes up in people when they get triggered.
Yeah.
And it's generally to defend themselves and at the expense of other people.
Yeah. Automatically, because a strategy sounds like, okay, I made this plan, but sometimes you're not even aware of this, of course.
Yes, it's automatic. A child gets hurt by a mother shouting at them, and automatically they may feel like they don't have the freedom to speak.
No.
And so all their life they're holding back speaking when they need to speak.
And do you think, I'm now living in this pink cloud because I just became father, but don't you think that it's all about a scream for love? Or is that too pink?
Are you asking about the mother screaming?
No.
Or the child?
Yeah, well, same. But what I mean is this hurting people. And I don't know if somebody, but I was busy with, look up what you guys did before. And I listened to some podcasts where you've been both. And then somebody said, hurt
people.
Yeah, and heal people.
And healed people heal people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I thought, wow, that's a great saying. So my question again to you then, Eldra, when people are hurting, do you think it's like a scream, give me love?
I don't necessarily believe that it's a scream for love so much as it is a defense mechanism. Okay. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me.
Yeah, okay.
Oftentimes, like Dr. McCleary spoke about, if I develop a defense mechanism for a pain or for a trauma or something that happened to me, what I do is develop a way to make certain that doesn't happen to me again.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when I'm triggered, the place that I'm coming from is making certain that I don't experience that pain again. So I am going to hurt you. I am going to make something happen first so that the pain doesn't come to me. So it's not necessarily about a cry for love so much as it is a defense mechanism to make certain that I give the pain before I receive the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, James?
And I also think it has to do with I matter. Mm-hmm. And the hurt that was experienced early on in life was ignoring, alienation, isolation, rejection, whatever. And it's a scream to say I'm here and I do matter.
Great. So let's make it personal, because Eldra, you are honest about this. You had, not a great childhood, so to say. So you were sexually abused when you were like 7 or 9 or both. And what was the mechanism that now, several years later, of course, what happened?
What was the mechanism that I created?
Yeah.
Okay. So the mechanism that I created was to, first of all, shut down.
Yeah.
And the episode that you're talking about, the sexual abuse that you refer to, there was a specific time where I capitulated to a babysitter in defense of my sister, someone who I loved. So the story that I told myself was that loving other people and caring about other people was a liability. So I determined at the age of 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, not to care about another human being, not to love another human being. And underneath that, I resolved that in any interaction with another human being, if there was any possibility of hurt or some sort of perpetration or some sort of alpha, beta, dominant, submissive, victimizer, I was going to be the one that was on top. I was going to be the one who was doing the hurting, who was in the position of strength. And so that's how my life played out.
Yeah. And long story short, that's how you went.
That's how I wound up serving life in prison.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, when you were in prison, I think, at the start, it was, the thing you are describing was getting bigger and bigger because, you can live like that in prison, maybe even better.
It's a perfect place to live like that. It's designed for all of those sorts of things to come out in a very concentrated way, in a fishbowl, with a lot of people packed into a very small place and a lot of people in a lot of pain, in a lot of hurt, jockeying for that same position.
Yeah.
So who is going to be the biggest shark? Who is going to be the greatest shark? And that's not to say that I ever believed that I was the greatest shark, but I was definitely always angling to put myself in position to be viewed as a threat, as dangerous,
trying to be
scared to death.
Yeah.
I don't want you to know that, but I also don't want you to fuck with me.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do I do that? I create a persona, I create an image, and I do things in such a way so that when people see it, my thinking is they are going to think, okay, I'm going to find an easier target, because that's not going to be an easy target.
No. And when was the moment? Can you take us back to the moment you were aware of this? And because that happened during your time in prison.
Mm-hmm. The moment that I became aware of that, I had started to do this work. I had started to sit in circle with folks like James Mcleary. And I was in the visiting room with the woman who is now my wife. And there was a part of myself that I was keeping from her.
Okay.
And we had been together for about a year. She had been coming up to visit me for about a year. And when she found out, about this part of myself, she was extremely hurt that there was a part of me that I had been holding back. Mm. And she asked, where does that come from? What is it that makes you not trust me after all we have built together, after all we have shared? Why would you not share this part about yourself?
Because to explain a bit, Holly, that's the name of your wife, she went there several times, and that's where you guys got a relationship.
That's where we started. We started as pen pals.
Yeah.
And it grew into a relationship. It grew into a love affair.
Yeah. Which is a great story. And well, to clarify a bit, she wasn't that like you have like females who are like, well, almost a kind of groupies, send males to, well, how the murder, how worse they are, the more in love they are.
No, I wasn't one of those. No, I wasn't a famous person.
No,
that
exactly.
Had like that.
To clarify, she well, at first maybe she thought what a crazy guy, but she felt the real you in some way.
Yes.
But there was a small part.
There was a small part of myself that I was still holding back. And she asked, she said, what is this part? And we actually did work sitting in the visiting room in Folsom, because I really wanted to give her the most intimate parts of myself and really wanted to give her the depths of who I was, because she is my first love. Yeah. That's the first woman outside of my family that I ever said, I love you to, and meant that. And so in the visiting room, I went back to that place, to the scene of the crime, to that couch in the 1970s when I was molested.
Yeah, okay.
That was the first time I ever talked about it with another human being. That was the first time I ever went back to that place and to that time. Yeah. And I committed to her that I would go back to group and work on this so that this would not be an impediment to our relationship moving forward.
Yeah. And I can imagine that sharing this to her, well, of course, it wasn't finished. I think as a human being, you're still busy with that and learning and growing.
Oh, yeah, I'm still learning and growing. Yeah. I mean, to this day, it still comes up in my relationship with her and with people.
Exactly.
Because it is work for me to be intimate with another human being.
Yeah.
Because the fear of being hurt, maybe not physically, but on a deep level, being hurt in my soul is always present. So I have to be aware. I make a choice to be aware of that and move through that fear.
Yeah.
So that I can have connection, so that I can be with another soul.
And then you say something, well, really important. So you are aware of that fear, and maybe it's hard to describe, but can you, well, learn us a bit how you are, because it's so, well, the mechanism again is like fear, get the fuck out. So how do you learn and how do you deal with fear nowadays?
For me, it's not fear, get the fuck out, because I don't know that that's possible. And if it is, I haven't gotten there yet. For me, it's about fear. Okay, here you are. What is the reality?
Yeah.
Is this fear in this moment real? Because let me rephrase that. The fear is real. Is it in proper proportion to this moment? And so I'm always processing and walking through that and asking myself, does the fear match this situation?
Yeah.
Because the fear is real and it is communicating something to me. But what is it communicating to me? Is it communicating something to me here in 2024, or is it communicating something to me from 1978?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that brings us to, is it true? It's like one of the 4 questions of Byron Katie.
Mm-hmm.
You had a great, because you have a podcast, Inner Circle podcast, and there was this episode with Byron Katie. You were asking, don't sue us because we also use the work, which I thought was pretty funny. She was, full of love, of course. And you asked her this great question, which I'm going to ask you right now. And James, you can think about it, because for you as well. What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is... Right now, my greatest fear is that I have no control over what happens to my youngest son.
Of course, yeah.
He's 8 years old, and right now, for the most part, there are things that I have influence over. Mm-hmm. And I don't have control. I have influence over, because now he's out in the world. He's going to school. He's around other people. And my greatest fear is that I will have to be a part of stealing his innocence to educate him about the evils in the world. Yeah. Because he is a young black male, there are things that right now he's a child, and the reality in the world in which I live in, there are people who are waiting to introduce him to his niggerhood. Yeah. And it's my responsibility to prepare him for that, and it's some ugly shit.
Yeah. Okay. James.
Yes.
What's your, and we're going to talk about your story and how you came up with the work. But first, this question, what's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that I don't show up for someone who needs me to be there for them. I have a complicated wound that happened also around sexual abuse, of me witnessing one of my siblings being sexually abused.
Oh, wow.
And I was very young. And now in my adult place, I know I made a contract for myself never to let someone down. If someone needed help, I was going to help them. And at the same time, other traumas that were inflicted on me had me turn cold. So I have a dance between being cold and survive and push you out of my heart.
And when you say cold, you mean with no feeling?
No feeling whatsoever. And it is more or less my life at the expense of your life. Yeah. What I need at your expense. And that wound came up. I mean, I grew up very poor in a rough neighborhood, and survival, everyone was trying to get what they needed. And since there were very few resources, people preyed on each other. And so I grew up either having to be the prey or to be a predator. Yeah. And that just became habit. Yeah. And so I have this dance between predation and the person who's going to stand in between someone who is going to get hurt by another person. It's really complicated. So that fear for me is, when am I not standing up for someone when I need to stand up for them? Yeah. And that's my greatest fear.
But could you say in a certain way your fear, your wound actually is like, one of your strengths now?
It is absolutely one of my strengths. Once I got a sense of, and my moment was going through a men's group, and I was 40 years old. And I learned through men loving on me and giving me space so that they could witness my wound, and I could be an observer and witnessing my own wound through the communication methodology that we use. I was able to see how I was wounded, and that I didn't need those strategies in order to stay safe. And so I developed other strategies from being a, fixer, friend of the friendless, a Don Quixote. And I developed a lot of strength that could withstand the predation of other people. And so that became a strength.
Yeah, nice. And I ask Eldra this, can you take us back to the moments you were aware of this? Because you were in prison as well.
I was never in prison. I was arrested, jailed lots of times, went to trial twice.
Okay.
But it's kind of interesting. At the time, I was born in 1948. So at the time, there was a lot of graft in the system. And my family was in crime, my father and my uncles. And we knew the lawyer who was plugged into the city hall. And so all I had to do was pay off the judge and the district attorney. And every time I went to court, it was dismissed.
Okay. So what was the first time you were like in a circle?
The first time I was in a circle was in a men's group. It's called the Mankind Project. And it's a global network of men doing initiatory weekends. And that was the first time that...
But how you came there? Because,
my brother-in-law went through the training.
It's all about connections.
I knew him since I was 8 years old. And when he went through the day before he went through the training, he looked nervous. And I teased him about being nervous after he told me he was going to a men's group. And at the time, there was satire about naked men in the woods hugging trees and beating drums. And, I shamed him, basically.
Nothing wrong with hugging trees.
Yeah. And when he came back from the training, I saw him and he was completely different. And so...
In a good way.
In a very good way. And so I said, I want to go to this myself. And I went the next month. And in that circle being held by men and them firmly not letting me get away with my bullshit, I was able to see where my bullshit started and where it ended, and consciously. And so now I use those tools to do that now.
I forgot one thing, but it's all good. Because we are in a really small circle now, I was thinking, okay, we have to start with the 6 agreements. Like, this conversation is like an inside circle, which of course it isn't. But Eldra, can you explain us? Okay, can you explain us what is the circle? How does it work?
How does it work? Well, to give you the abbreviated version, you sit your ass in a chair, you tell the truth, and then you go out in the world and you live that truth.
Okay, okay.
That's what happens in a circle.
Well, that's wow. And can you what are the 6 agreements?
So the 6 agreements are anonymity. What happens in the circle stays in the circle.
Which in this case is a bit weird because we are so...
We're talking to more people, so
But okay.
We speak from the I perspective. I speak from the I perspective. I don't say you, we.
Not like generaling, no, okay.
Not generalizing. That puts me in a space to own what's happening for me and what my experience is. We don't come intoxicated. And if someone needs to be in that space, if their spirit, if their soul, if they have a wound that just needs to be in that space and they're under the influence of something, you let somebody know so that we can keep you safe and we can keep the group safe. We don't, there's no violence, on the inside. That no violence was, very obvious, don't punch somebody in the nose, don't pull a knife out your ass and stab somebody, don't do those sorts of things. And in general, what how it translates now is don't touch anyone without permission. Speak truth, and you have the right to pass. You don't have to participate in anything you don't want to.
No. I think it's really because in a whole nother perspective, which was about Reiki, and there was this thing that you always have to talk from the I perspective. And then at that moment, during that circle, I became aware of the fact that a lot of times, me including, but a lot of everybody normally talks about, with you or yeah. Well, I just want to explain, I do this in Dutch. Het is zo goed om daar bewust van te zijn, omdat, ja, dan maak je een beetje een afstand ervan. That's the whole thing. That there's always like a distance, that it isn't about yourself, which is, yeah.
It's not about self. If I go into the habit of speaking from something other than the I perspective,
Mm-hmm.
to really break it down and make it easy for folks to understand, what I'm doing is hiding. It's another way for me to hide.
Exactly.
And if I bring more people into my experience, there's more opportunity for me to hide and not own what it is that I'm feeling, not own what it is that is going on with me. Basically, what I'm doing is creating a mob mentality.
And how? Because, of course, like I said in the intro, the most of our listeners, well, they have hopefully nothing to do with life in prison. But we can make this bigger. And well, in your life, Eldra, how do you deal with, like, well, I don't know if I should call it a black page, but of course it is like something, I don't know, you feel ashamed of, the reason why you were sentenced to prison. How do you deal with that? Because that, well, it's a really personal question for me. Of course, I did things, well, that I, well, feel ashamed about.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to, I have to deal with that. Other people will judge me for that past. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I believe I do understand what you're saying. So I'm going to speak to what it is I feel you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
For me, it's not about shame around what I did.
Okay.
Because I there's no way for me to take that back. And if I live continually in that place of shame, then I'm locked in the past, and that keeps me from moving forward and moving into a place where I can atone for what I've done.
Yeah.
And something that you said, and you've said it a couple of times now, so I want to bring it to the forefront. When we speak about prison, and, you know, I have been in physical prison, and a lot of your viewers maybe have not gone inside of a physical prison. I'm working to change the paradigm about the belief of what prison is, because all of your listeners, I'm not going to say most, I'm going to bring everybody in since we're in circle. All of your listeners have suffered from some form of prison and continue to suffer from some form of prison. I was in prison. I was incarcerated long before I was in physical prison.
Exactly.
When I was assaulted as a kid, and many things that happened prior to that, when I was creating defensive mechanisms, when I was creating ways to be, when I was creating self-talk, when I was creating things that didn't work for me, what I was creating were prison cells.
Exactly.
I was creating things that had control and dominion over me and how I show up. And I was forcing myself to act from that place. I had no choice. In physical prison, there's very little choice. There's a set routine. They tell you when you can cop a squat and take a deuce. They tell you when you can eat. They tell you when you can shower. They tell you when you can go out and get recreation. So when I create inside of myself, inside of my mind, these boxes about who I am and how I have to be, and it's based on this defensive mechanism to deal with trauma, what I'm telling myself is, when this happens, I have to do this.
Yeah.
There's only one thing that I can do. When this happens, when somebody says this, I have to react in this way. That's fucking prison. So the shame for me is that I give my power away.
Yeah.
I make a choice when I put myself in prison. I'm making a choice to abdicate my power. That for me is where shame comes. When I am aware of that, and if I continue to do that, then I will continue to be ashamed of that, because now I have the awareness. There was a time when I was unconscious and I didn't know what I was doing, so I can forgive myself for that. Now that I know and I make a choice to do that, then there's space for shame to come in for me.
Wow. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that too, because the viewers who've never been locked up, to explain a cell or prison in another way, limiting beliefs. They limit your ability to think beyond that belief. Limiting emotions. I can't feel this way towards another individual because I've been conditioned not to.
Yeah.
Those
this
limiting
whole fixed mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is what closes down the choice making. And in that sense, there's no room to move around but in your small cell of beliefs and feelings.
Okay, but then let me ask you this big question. How you get out of that prison? How you make it into like a healing house?
Well, I think some people have revelations, right? For me and for other people that, in my experience, they need the community to hold them accountable to the belief and to help them unpack and dismantle those beliefs, where they came from, how much energy's been put into it, and then how have you harmed yourself or others by living in those beliefs and those feelings. And so the community helps with that, because every avenue I want to escape when I'm encircled doing my work is closed off by some other person. And now I find myself looking right in the mirror and seeing the ugliness of what I have become and what I'm doing. And in that place, my shame comes from denying that. If I own it, I don't have to be in shame. If I deny it, then I fall back into shame.
So what I hear you saying is open the door and let other people help you and carry you, and you carry other people as well. Let's do it all together.
Yes, and be careful who you're letting in the door. Because there are some dark magicians, people who really know what they're doing and can manipulate you into things that you go deeper into your hole of shame.
The rabbit hole. Okay. But can you explain this a bit? Why are you saying this? What kind of people are you talking about?
Well, when you said have other people help the community help you. Well, there's cults. And at all these cults there's a demigod. There's one person who calls the shots for everything. And with that much power and no limit on that power, they satisfy their desires. And in satisfying those desires, they're not paying attention to the needs and the wants of other people.
Great that you say so. So this podcast is called KUKURU, which is about the thing that I was busy with life, this is this thing that I don't believe in gurus. I believe it's all in you, and of course, we have to do it all together. But when you say so, and it's not like a cult thing, but I know. What do you think about religion?
I think religion is more or less a philosophy, with some really good moral ideas, and as long as it doesn't turn into dogma, because religion for me was turned into dogma. I went through 12 years of Catholic school, and they're good Catholics, and they're good priests, and they're good nuns. But some of the nuns and priests that I ran into, they fit into, I'm an emissary of God, and so I know everything, and I'll tell you what to do. And one instant happened where I was getting ready to get Holy Communion, and I thought a little wafer that embodies the spirit of Jesus Christ. And in the Catholic Church lineage, at least from my understanding of it, was now I have my union card to get into heaven. But I'm African American, right?
Yeah.
And so when I went to ask the priest, because I was looking at all these pictures of a hippie, sad-looking, straight-haired guy, and I knew that in that part of the world, there weren't the people who looked like that, and Jesus was supposed to be a strong protector in person, and these pictures didn't exhibit that. And when I asked him about that, well, was Jesus white? And he said, of course Jesus was white. And then I went, well, are there any colored people in heaven? Because that's what we were called then. He said, no.
Wow.
And my heart just sank.
Yeah.
Because now I can't go to heaven. And then he said, well, wait a minute. There are some colored people because someone has to clean up.
Wow.
And here's my prison of internalized victimization. I was happy. I get to go and clean up in heaven.
Oh, that's making me really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you see, I believed him.
Yeah.
And so that is why it's dangerous to give your power over
it's
to one person.
Like an ego thing, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, talking about we were just talking a bit about the routines in prison. Of course, that's really, well, you don't want to do it. But I have this question always. So I will ask you, Eldra, do you have like a morning routine, some morning rituals when your day starts, like now, I mean?
Yeah. So my day starts now. My ritual is I get up about 5 a.m. and I exercise. I got a little gym built up in my home office, and that is a time for me to settle and be with my thoughts while everything is still quiet. The house is still quiet outside. The windows are open. I can hear nature, and I can set my intention for the day. Every day I'm setting my intention for today. Who do I want to be today? I'm asking myself, how do I want to show up today? Because I can't rest on the laurels of yesterday.
No.
Because if I go ape shit crazy today, that's the only thing anybody's going to key on. We're not going to be able to reference what happened yesterday.
No.
So because of who I am and who I know I can be, because of all of the little prison cells that I know have the capacity to activate within me, I'm always looking to question, who do I want to be today?
Yeah.
I don't want to go into that unconsciously, because when I move through the world unconsciously, shit happens and it's usually not good.
No.
So I'm always wanting to set my intention for the day before I start meeting other people and greeting other people and having interactions. I want to be aware about who I am and how I'm going to show up, because I never take it for granted that other people are in a state of awareness.
A little circle with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And do you also have a little check before you go to sleep? Like, how was it today?
If there is something that really stood out for me, I'll give an example. A couple of weeks ago, there was something that happened, between me and my 8-year-old son, where I got frustrated. And something that was going on throughout the day, and the frustration had built up to the point to where he was not acting in a way in which I believed he should in dealing with his mother. So I came in as the disciplinarian with the snappy, the commanding voice.
Your dad was a military man.
My dad was a military. So I went into drill sergeant mode and put him in his place in a way that was harsh. And so at the end of the day, as I'm taking stock of, okay, where could I have shown up better? Where could I have done something better? Where did I fuck up today? That is what stood out for me. So the next morning, when I got him up and got him ready for school, I asked, that situation, and I painted the situation for him, and I asked him, how did you receive that? What was going on for you when I was yelling? And he said, it scared me.
Wow. Yeah.
And it made me sad.
Yeah.
And so then I apologized. And I explained to him what was going on for me when I was in that moment. I took accountability for my frustration that I had allowed to build up and that I was unconscious of, and that I allowed to have me act with him in that situation that was inappropriate for that situation. Mm-hmm. There were things that were going on that had absolutely nothing to do with him, and he unfairly got the brunt of that. And then he told me, he said, it's okay, Dad. Sometimes you have bad days. Sometimes we all have bad days. I understand. And then I said, well, thank you for that. I appreciate your grace. And just because I'm having a bad day doesn't give me the right to treat you less than. No. Just because I'm having a bad day doesn't mean that I get to act in a way that causes injury to you. So what I need you to do, and what you have permission to do, is if I'm doing something or I'm saying something and I'm acting in a way that causes you to feel sadness or causes you to feel scared, you have my permission to let me know that in the moment, because I might not be aware that this is happening. I might not be conscious that this is something that I'm doing. So you have permission to stand up for yourself.
That's great. And really full of love, of course. And how do you react to yourself later on? How, because, well, it sounds familiar in another way, but then for me, I always judge myself so hard for, well, longer than is necessary. How do you deal with that? Because you sound like a really, I think you are hard for yourself as well.
I could be hard on myself if I don't go back and make amends. Then I'm carrying it. Then I'm holding on to it. Then I'm looking at it. Then I'm judging because I know I was wrong. And I've done nothing to clean that up. No. So I should be ashamed. You know, if I create the space to live in shame and to be in that prison, then I deserve to be in the box. But I go back and clean that up and do the work. We have our circle. We're sitting in circle, and he doesn't know that we're in circle, but he's getting the language, and I'm modeling for him what it looks like. And I'll start with that term. I'm modeling for him what it looks like for a man to be accountable and to be responsible and to own his shit. And so hopefully those give him lessons on how to be a good human being. Now, what he does with those lessons as he goes out into the world, I'm not attached to that. No. I would like him to go out into the world and be that person. But at the end of the day, if he goes out and becomes a serial killer, I can take stock and look at, did I do everything in my power? Did I do everything that I could? And if the answer is yes, while he's on trial, getting ready to go to death row, I'm going to be sleeping like a baby.
I don't think so, but I know what you're saying. This is
no. I'm going to be sleeping like a baby. I know myself. You may not think so, but I'm going to be sleeping like a baby because it's out of my power. It's out of my control. I don't have control over what you do. When he gets into that place and he's making choices for himself, I will be sad.
Exactly. Because I asked you
my heart
earlier, the greatest fear, and that's this whole thing.
It will hurt my heart. But again, once I take stock, if I have done everything that is within my power, if I have done everything that I am responsible for in a good way, if I have been a good steward in my position as a father, I can be at peace. I can be sad and be at peace at the same time.
Okay. But I don't think you will sleep well. But okay. It was like the circle in a nutshell, actually. James, do you have like a morning routine?
I do. So every morning I do something with myself called PIES, P-I-E-S.
Okay.
So I do a scan of my physical body.
And
if there's some tightness somewhere, it's either physical because I hurt myself or strained myself, or maybe I'm holding some energy around something, right? And when I locate that and I get a sense of where the origin may have come from, then I go to the I, which is the intellectual. What thoughts am I having? What's the story I'm running right now in relationship to this tightness here?
Mm-hmm.
And then I move to E, which is emotion. And I think to myself, well, am I mad, sad, glad, fear, or in shame? And when I isolate which one of those, it helps me to sort out the triggering event. And when I isolate that triggering event, the S for me is spiritual, but it's not about God or higher power. It's really about, well, what do I want to have happen here?
Yeah.
And I do that in the morning.
So, sorry, what's the P standing for then?
What physically is going on in my body.
Physically, okay, then I've got it.
And I do it at night.
Yeah.
And so it's a review of what I either did or didn't do that I had planned and should have done.
Yeah.
And then I can make amends by paying attention to it the next day.
Pies. And you came up with this yourself, or is it like...
No, this is actually, my wife went through a women's initiatory group, and that's something they do.
Yeah, okay.
And it worked for me.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Interesting. Okay. There's this thing, you're talking about your wife now. There's this thing with masculinity. And I heard you talk about this a lot, Eldra. And, well, sometimes I was thinking, what's wrong with masculinity?
Absolutely nothing.
No, of course I knew. And you are talking about toxic masculinity, of course. But well, can you explain what you guys are doing with the work? What you guys were doing in a prison now? Hopefully in the Netherlands as well. What are you aware of or warning for actually?
Specifically, can you be a bit more clear? Because I want to speak to really what you're speaking to. Because I heard a couple of things in there.
Okay. Yeah. What is okay? Let me ask this general question. What is toxic masculinity?
Masculinity that is toxic.
Yeah.
Anything can be toxic. Now that is something that has become sort of a trigger, in the last, 6 or 8 years or whatever it is. And it's a code word that really, my experience, in some circles has been weaponized to, create a space where men feel guilty and ashamed for being men.
Thank you for saying this. This is actually what I was talking about. And sometimes I feel, and I don't know, guys, how you were, but sometimes I feel like, do I need to feel bad because I am a man? And of course, I understand the bigger picture. Then it's not only about testosterone and of course, let's talk about feelings.
But there are toxic traits that as a man, and because I have masculinity, I can use my masculinity to bring harm. I mean, I've got water here, and I can have a toxic reaction to drinking too much water. People have actually died from a toxic response, physically to drinking too much water.
Absolutely, yeah.
As a male, and I say male, not man, because for me there's a difference. As a male, there's an inherent masculinity.
Yeah.
And as a man, there's a responsibility that comes to hold that masculinity in a healthy way. As a male, I have never walked down the street at night and been concerned that a white panel van was going to pull up and snatch me in it, and I was going to wind up on a shipping container headed off to Saudi Arabia somewhere as a sex slave. That's never been a fear of mine. I've never been in a social environment where when I got up and went to the bathroom, I came back and looked at my drink and thought, damn, somebody probably dropped a roofie in this so they can take me off in a corner somewhere and violate me. That is not, for me, in my experience, a male's concern or fear.
No.
But I have a lot of women in my life, and those are the sorts of things just on the surface that are very real fears for them, that every day they're steeling themselves and they're preparing themselves for as they go out into and those are just a couple of very small examples. So for me, toxic masculinity is when I am with a group of guys. And I know, because I've been, educated by women, that there is a natural fear that comes up for women when they are alone and they're in a presence of a group of guys. And the phrase is pack mentality. Yeah. There's a fear for women that there will be a pack mentality and there will be an energy that they need to fear and they need to be concerned about their safety. And if in this space where it's me and James and a bunch of other guys, I start to catcall, or I start to say something, or I start to do, something that brings about the energy that obviously tramples on this woman's rights, and she begins to feel nervous. It's obvious she's nervous now. She's trying to get away. She's clutching herself. She's starting to, get small and go into that defensive posture. Yeah. But nobody in the group checks me about that. Nobody in the group says anything. They're just laughing, they're joking, or even if they're just being silent. That's toxic masculinity.
Yeah. So this is about unawareness.
Yeah. Unawareness and awareness.
Yeah.
Because I can be unaware that this is happening, and I can be very much aware that this is happening.
Yeah.
Then I'm just being predatory. Yeah. Now we're not talking about toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about predatory behavior.
Yeah. So I think you came up with this normal thing that could happen. We are sitting here, we're just drinking, sitting and we're not like a group of, 3 men, and there's this one lady coming. How can you how can you let her know that you are aware of this in a way that
I don't know that it's about letting her know that I'm aware of this. It's about leaving her the hell alone and letting her live her life. I don't have to say anything or do anything.
Yeah, but this is the problem, because when you are not aware of this and we are just having fun and telling jokes and this is about the toxic thing, because she feels afraid because of things she read or things that happened. We are not aware of this, just making fun, ha ha ha.
What are we making fun of?
I don't know.
If we're making fun of her,
no.
If we're talking about her, then there's a responsibility.
Yeah, of course.
If we're just there and we're engaging with one another, and then she comes into the space, and we're still engaging with one another, that has absolutely nothing to do with her. I don't have a responsibility to then make her feel safe. I can't make her feel safe.
No. Yeah, James?
Yeah, the Western culture is based on patriarchy, and that means that men have the power for things, and that women don't have. And men can enforce that power on women at will, without any retribution whatsoever. And it's changing. And at the same time, what I've noticed is that if a woman is in a meeting and she brings up a point and nobody acknowledges the point, and a male a minute later brings up the same point, all the males go, yeah, Jack, that was great, right? The other thing is, if a woman is trying to get across a point and I raise my voice or step into her space, then that is a toxic use of my power and freedom of choice to not regard your choice.
No.
So there is a fine line around I'm doing something, we're doing something, and I look over and I'm aware that the woman is having a reaction to it. My responsibility is not to take care of her, but to engage with her to see if something's happening that I could stop or not do.
Yeah.
Right? And if I do that, then I am considering her presence in our presence.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but yeah.
I want to drop this in here too, because again, you know, that term, that phraseology, toxic masculinity, I'm very aware of how in some circles it's been weaponized, you know, and it has a lot of men walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And like really, really aware, hyper aware of, you know, can I say this? Can I not say this? Because nobody wants to be, if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to be run out of the human race. Because we're in an era now where I can say something right now and a minute later it can be broadcast all over the world. Now I'm persona non grata as far as the human race is concerned. And that's a very real fear, unfortunately.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about toxic masculinity and what that looks like and what that can be, it's not necessarily just about how I show up with women. It's not, because toxic masculinity can also be, I'll go back to the interaction with me and my son.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't go back and clean that up, that's toxic. And what I'm doing, because again, he's watching me, he's learning how to be a man. He's learning how to grow into his manhood. I'm teaching him that it's okay to scream at people. I'm teaching him that it's okay that the bigger person has the authority. And that is a form of masculinity that he can carry out into the world, that he can, do against other males, not just women. No. I can tell him as a youngster who's growing up, because he's highly expressive, he's highly in tune with his emotions. I can tell him, motherfucker, stop crying and quit acting like a little pussy. I can say that. And I can begin to train him in that way. That's a prison that exists within me. That is something, when I spoke about what I do in the morning, what my ritual is in the morning, who I want to be. Because there are times when he is being expressive and my habitual thought is to say just that, because I'm fed up and I know how to put it into this real quick. So I have to work against that. Because that's a habitual trait. That's something that I learned so long ago, and I adopted as a belief system that I no longer view as something that works for me today. It is not something that today is not who I want to be. It's not a lesson that I want to teach. So that is toxic as well. And so if I'm teaching him that, then these things that we're talking about how there's an ability to be unaware around women when he grows up into being a man, that's where things like that start.
Great. And do you guys think we live in a good time about this subject?
No.
No.
I don't think we live in a good time right now. I think we live in a time, though, when more people are open to begin having these conversations.
Well, that's a start.
Yeah, that's a start. But I don't think that we're in a good time. I think that we're in a time right now where as a race of people, we're divided on so many issues. And that's why it's so necessary to have these conversations and to have these circles. If we were in a good time, I wouldn't have the job that I have. Because there would be no need for these circles. My aim as executive director of Inside Circle is to put Inside Circle out of business. So that the things that we do in Circle are the ways that people just naturally interact with one another. People are naturally in a circle space with each other. People are naturally owning their stuff. People are naturally looking for the best, not just in themselves, but honoring the best that are in other folks. People are naturally creating space to support other people living into their best sense of self and honoring that and praising that and celebrating it. and seeing the medicine that they have within themselves and living from that place, not having to feel like they need to go to a workshop or a training or sit in circle and have it structured, because we sit in those spaces, we sit in trainings, we sit in circles, and then people go away from the circles and they forget that that's when the real work starts.
Yeah.
When we're in these trainings, what we're doing is practicing to do the work in real life.
Exactly, yeah.
But people leave from the circle, they get away from the circle, and the magic of the experience begins to dissipate. And it becomes a distant memory, and then it gets foggy, and then they don't know how to reach out and touch it. And they fall back into those old habits, and they go back into those prison cells within themselves, and they lock the door from the inside.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of mine, and we talked about this subject, and then I was thinking, at some point it would be great if we were attacked by aliens, because in a certain way, then we all felt like human beings, and like there is this like natural circle, and we're all the same, and we all are afraid of those aliens.
Yeah, you know what? That has happened to some degree. When 9/11 happened, everyone had a lot of camaraderie and love and care for each other, and maybe as little as a month later, that it was back to normal. So I think we're actually reaching a crisis point. In our culture. And you know, there are markers that can show that, but this tribalism that's occurring, where convictions are just held by a certain group whole scale without examination at all, but because they're in fear, they have to pick a side.
Polarization all over the place.
Exactly. However, I think at this time, because of groups like this and books that are people writing to raise people's awareness around things, I think that it is good. That helps whenever the crisis happens. So I don't think we're in good times. I think we're getting ready to hit a crisis, but I think things that people are doing and what we're doing.
Well, and the good thing is I always try to be positive, you know, and well, that's your story, of course, as well, Eldra, and all the stories talking about at this table are like, it all starts with a crisis. So in a certain way, there's a kind of light of the end of the tunnel. You mentioned books, so that's a great bridge for me. I asked you guys to mention 3 books that were were important for you as a human being in your journey as you are sitting here right now.
One is Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon Hill,
Yes, because I came from a poverty consciousness, and I wanted to get out of that poverty consciousness, and it really grounded me in a lot of principles that had nothing to do with going to get money.
No, exactly. It's like rich, like
exactly. Abundance is around. All I have to do is go in my backyard. I can't even count the blades of grass, right?
No.
The other one was...
Well, sorry, but when was the moment you heard about that book and you even read it? Was it
I was 19 years old.
Okay, it was wow, great.
And then shortly after that, I read Carlos Castaneda's books around his apprenticeship with shamans. And I was always interested in this paranormal activity. Because I was having these experiences all my life. I mean, when I was 4 years old, I went into the bathroom and there were 4 figures like Casper the Ghost. There was a cartoon and he was a ghost figure, and there were malevolent ghosts and there were good ghosts, and these were malevolent ghosts. And they were grilling me. I don't remember what they were asking, but I had the feeling I was being grilled. Now, whether that was an hallucination or not, it felt very real and has an impression on me now. And I'm I'm always seeing things and hearing things that aren't there. So when I read that book, it let me know that there were people and indigenous people that actually do commune with science that we just have not measured yet.
No, exactly.
And had theory around.
Exactly.
And so I got interested in that and started exploring those areas. And the third book was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Of course.
And I thought, wow, that's freedom. When I have the power to think and feel and believe what I want to think, feel, and believe, and not in reaction to something that's happening outside of myself.
Wow, that's a great threesome of books. And talking about indigenous people, I'm curious. Have you visited some of the indigenous people? Have you worked with, for example, ayahuasca, or what have you done?
Yes, actually, after I began doing the men's work, I got interested in going to workshops. I'd never gone to workshops before in my life, and I went to a shape-shifting workshop with a guy named Perkins, and he said, "Listen, I'm going down to the Amazon." He's talking to my wife next month. And would you two like to come with me? And so we went with him, and he had a relationship with some of the indigenous people in the jungle.
Wow.
And so we went down and spent time with them, and they adopted us into their family, and actually had us go through their initiatory rites. So we had a relationship with them for about 20 years. And my wife has some psychic ability, and she dreamed of a Sangoma, which is a shaman from South Africa. And she dreamed of this person, and someone gave her a book that he had written about a week later. And then I was invited to go to South Africa to lead a training about a month later. And we were sitting in the home of the people who were hosting us, and their daughter came by for dinner, and she's an ethnographic person.
Yeah.
She had just come from photographing and interviewing this Credo Mutwa.
Wow.
And so we said, well, where is he? And she told us where to find him. And we went to see him, and he adopted us into his family. And we spent 20 years working with him, and were initiated in that system. And then I ran into the Lakota people who wanted my wife and I to support them in cultural shame, because we were leading workshops and things. And so we went and worked with them for about 10 years.
Wow.
And of course, ayahuasca was part of the journey, even though I did not want to take ayahuasca anytime I took it.
No.
But for the apprenticeship, if you will, it was necessary for me.
Yeah.
My elders actually told me it's not necessary to take ayahuasca, but we Western people are so dense that we need something to shock us out of our place of idleness and laziness.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it did.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I really didn't need to do ayahuasca anymore.
No.
Because the tools were available.
And maybe
for me.
you were already having a dance. Sorry for that, James. But are you going to write all this stuff in a book?
Yes, I'm finally getting ready to write some books on how rites of passage is important for the healing process.
Yeah.
Because all the men's work we do is a rite of passage.
Yeah. Exactly.
People have an urge to come to a workshop, say. They may not even know why, but that's the call.
Yeah.
And then when they get there, there's a challenge. Why are you here?
Yeah.
What'd you come to get?
Yeah.
And that shocks that person into having to sober up and really figure out what that is and answer the question.
Yeah.
And then there's this stripping away of all these defenses and coping mechanisms and strategies and stories, till now you're left with nothing. Now what? And now you're looking in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, instead of having to do an animal right? What you do is you wrestle with your own demon.
Yeah.
And then there's the ascent. It's, okay, I've learned something about myself that's powerful and potent, which we call medicine. We use that medicine out in the world, and there's a responsibility to use it and an accountability if you don't.
So you can explain, the elder was talking about the medicine as well. So is this like the wound is the strength? Is that the medicine?
Out of the wound comes the strength. Yeah. Because you've had to call on some potent resource that's unique to you to survive.
And that's the medicine.
That's the medicine. And then it gets cultivated. And when you misuse the medicine for your own gain, that's the poison or the shadow part of it. So it's the same gift, but used dysfunctionally, it's shadow. Used functionally, it's medicine.
Yeah. And that brings us back to Eldra, your story. At first, it was like, well, you can say poison in a way. You've learned how to, we're the big shark. Mm-hmm. And now you're using it to be like, well, not a shark, but the big guy learning people how to live.
Okay. That is
take this as a compliment.
And I receive that. I receive that. And that's a part of my work as well is receiving.
Receiving is much more difficult than
doesn't
giving.
come easy for me. It doesn't come easy for me. A big piece of the medicine for me is modeling vulnerability and openness.
Yeah. Have you talked about this? Is your father still living?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you have contact with him?
My father and my mother are still living. They just celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary. They went to New Orleans to celebrate. Yeah. And so, we have talked about this. I actually spoke about that trauma with my father sitting in a visiting room.
What a gift.
That was the first time that he learned about it. And so luckily for me, I still have my parents around, and they get to experience who I am growing into, not who I've become, who I'm growing into. They get to experience that.
Great. So for you, the same question, Eldra. I don't know, maybe you don't read any books, which is all good, of course.
I spent a lot of time in incarcerated settings. I've read tons of books.
Of course, of course. Wow. So then it was really hard to pick three ones, I can imagine. So what's...
Three that really stand out to me when I'm asked that question is The Four Agreements.
The Four Agreements.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, I heard. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. I was thinking about the Dutch saying,
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's a really spiritual book. I love it.
And the principle there that I really hold on to is, and try to live by, is don't take things personally. Because when I take things personally, shit goes down the crapper.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Without fail.
Yeah.
So, that's really a part of my journey is working to try and not take things personally as often as I have the capacity to do. And another book that stands out for
and you
me,
read that in prison, actually?
I did.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I did. Wow. A Course in Miracles.
Wow. Well, that's not even a book. That's like, no, it's like a way of living.
Exactly.
And it's in a certain way hard to read.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah. A Course in Miracles. And for me to distill it to its simplest form for me is, coming from a place of love and recognizing miracles and seeing miracles in everything, in every person, in every interaction, because they're always there when I'm open to seeing them and experiencing from that place.
Then I can ask you this question.
Come on with it.
Well, because I'm really studying it, and there's always this thing about ego, and of course, in Miracles, in a way, it's saying ego is like a bad thing or it's not the true thing, and my ego, I guess that's what it is. It's like, yeah, but there is a reason for that. And so what do you think about ego?
So ego is something that is, it's another thing that's gotten a horrible rap.
Yeah.
It's gotten a bad rap.
Yeah.
And for me, ego, and we've been talking about it here, you know, about light and shadow and about medicine and poison. My ego can be a source of poison. And it can also be a source of medicine.
Okay.
Because my ego holds a wealth of knowledge. Now, the application of that knowledge is me integrating my spirit and wisdom coming forth in relationship with that knowledge. Ego is a part of my personality.
Yeah.
So to say to get rid of my personality and I want everybody walking around being the same cookie cutter sort of thing, I don't agree with that.
No.
There's a balance.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. But I think you explained it really nice. That's the whole thing. Sometimes I'm reading a part in Course in Miracles. I'm like, yeah, but well, there is like ego. But yeah, great. Okay, and the third book.
The third book is, and I want to give you two for the third book, of Water and Spirit by Malidoma Somé and The Prince by Machiavelli.
Okay, let's start with Water and Spirit.
Water and Spirit. So Malidoma Somé was a teacher of one of my teachers. And it's a book about what we've been speaking about here, about the journey, about the hero's journey, about initiation, about being robbed. For me, it's a metaphor of a lot of cultures, of my own culture as a Black male in America, being taken away from my roots, being taken away from my culture, and then trying to find a way back after having assimilated to someone else's culture and making that a part of myself, and then trying to get back to my roots and trying to go back to the connection to spirit, the connection to the truth of who I am and who I was placed on this plane to be. That was a part that was robbed and was stolen metaphorically by colonizers, but also by myself. When I put myself in those prisons, I've done it to myself. So how do I then strip those things away, those learnings and those teachings, and go through the ritual initiation process to get back to the core and the truth of my spirit and live from that place?
Yeah. But these, I'm glad you mentioned it, because sometimes for me it's even, well, too big. Yeah, it's a big theme to talk about because, well, in a certain way, it's like, well, a collective trauma we as human beings have. Because, well, for example, for me, and yeah, well, in a certain way, I am a part of this whole slavery thing. From South Africa, because I'm a human being, and oh man, I can sometimes I can even cry about this, and then
So, having said that, what do you do with that? What do you do with that feeling? What do you do with what lives in you when that comes up for you?
It's a great question, and to be honest, I don't know. I don't know what I can do.
What do you want to do with it?
Well, because I think it's actually the first time we talk about this subject here. Yeah. I want to express my unknown feelings about this.
So what keeps you from doing that?
Yeah, I don't know, because I think who am I to talk about this, because I have nothing to do with it on paper, because I'm just like a guy born here in Haarlem in the Netherlands and grew up great, and so
if that's true for you, why do you feel that?
Yeah, because I feel like we're all human beings suffering from the from a past in a certain way. Okay,
so I'm going to make it hopefully easier and create an easier path for you. I heard you say your truth, your reality is you were born here.
Yeah.
Not there.
Yeah.
You didn't actively participate in that.
No.
You are aware that things happen that have repercussions that continue to ripple.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your responsibility with that knowledge? What does your inner wisdom tell you your responsibility is? And if there is anything, what keeps you from living from that place?
Yeah. Well, of course, but it sounds a bit too general, but it's the only thing I can do now is, just become father, like I said, is teaching love and giving love.
Okay, so now let's stop there and let's say that again,
Yeah.
but take the word only out.
Oh, I have no idea what's my phrase.
You said the only thing that I can do is.
Yeah, okay.
So let's take only out of that.
Okay.
And
So,
say what I can do is.
the thing that I can do is give love.
Okay, so now let's take can and replace that with will.
Yeah. Wow.
Now say it.
The thing I will do is give love.
There's your answer.
Yeah.
Now we in circle.
Goosebumps all over the place. Yeah. Thank you so much, Eldra, for this Water and Spirit. Okay, the fourth book you mentioned.
The Prince, Machiavelli.
The Prince. Oh, yeah. And you wrote that in prison, or what?
I did.
And
There
what gave it to you?
there were elements of it that I was familiar with before prison, but I really internalized a lot of it in prison as a way of survival, as a way of dealing with all of the politics and the machinations that go on behind the scenes, because there's so many, everybody's aware of the physical things, but there's so much mental gymnastics that are going on. There are so many twists and turns and that would make a soap opera look like a Disney cartoon, with the folks that are in there, that are housed in there, but also with the people that are responsible for making certain that the people that are there stay there. There's so much shit going on. And so for me, it was very necessary to understand. I don't like to, paint myself as a politician, but to understand how politics work and how politicians move, so that when I'm in the presence of it, I can be a politician, but not be viewed as a threat in the political realm.
No.
As a means to make certain I live to see another day.
Yeah. But do you have any ambition to be in politics?
Not the way that politics exists today.
No.
I have ambition to influence politics.
Yeah. Okay.
I would love everybody who is engaged in politics to sit in circle. I would like anybody who, number one, I'd like every human being. I believe every human being on the face of the planet can benefit from sitting in circle.
Yeah.
But in the instant, I would hope that I can influence and get as many leaders, not just politicians, but, captains of industry, folks that have the capacity to make decisions that affect masses of people. They need to be sitting in circle.
Yeah.
I have to be aware. I have a responsibility to be aware of the things that I do, the impact that they have, because everything that I do has an impact. So if I'm somebody that runs a multinational corporation, the decisions that I'm making, the fact that you have people in those positions, it's not a bad thing that they're making, more money than 20 generations can spend. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But how am I getting that money? What is the impact? What is the legacy that I'm leaving, not just for my children, but in how I got what I got?
Yeah.
So I want those people thinking about that when they're making the decisions, so that they're making those decisions from a good place and from a healthy way in which the impact is positive for everyone.
Yeah.
Be a billionaire, have, great big jets and all of that. I don't hate on any of that. And how'd you get it?
Yeah. And what do you do with it? But yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great ambition.
Let me just say, we're actually living that ambition because we do this work with people of the cloth.
Yeah.
We do this work with politicians. We do this work with teachers.
Yeah.
We do this work with anybody who might have influence over other people. And we just came off of a year program in New York City where we work with 2 of the gang units that cause the most crime. And we met with those young men over a year's period of time. But we also included the police in those districts to sit
all
down
in the
with
circle.
them.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
The district attorneys to sit in those circles. The directors from the mayor's office on crime and gun violence. And so it's not just the people who are supposedly the perpetrators of crime. It's also the people in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we have them sit in the circle. We just came from a jail where we had the sheriff sit in a circle with the men who are locked up that we do circle with.
Yeah.
And surprisingly to us, maybe not surprising because we sort of create the environment for people to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
He unpacked his personal life and what a burden it was on him, and what a burden it was to be a sheriff. And the men in the circle embraced him and comforted and nurtured him. And it was completely natural at the time, but when he left, he communicated to me as mind was blown.
Yeah,
he never expected that. So we're already doing that.
Yeah,
We're doing it in a Trojan horse way, but pretty soon it will turn into something bigger.
So that's the, you say it's Trojan horse thing because, well, you guys are now here in Holland to do it in the prison, but, well, you have to go to The Hague, for example, where the politicians should be in a circle, and
the reason for me on a personal level why it makes sense, and I can speak from a personal level, is if, people are always talking about prisons, it always goes back to the physical prison.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going on there, and creating spaces of healing for the folks that are in there. If we do not sit with the people who are holding those people captive, and those people are still coming from a place of trauma, then they are continuing to brutalize the folks that I am influencing and creating space to begin to heal. So now what can come up for me is I'm responsible for contributing to creating a bunch of people who act like lambs in the den of lions. So now I have a responsibility to sit with those lions and create more lambs. This is something that we're actually doing. He talked about, the jail. We're actually doing this in prison in California. We have, in one of the prisons that we go to, there is an associate warden who sits in the circle with the men. This is a woman, associate warden, who sits in the circle with the prisoners and unpacks her stuff. And she has the potential, when we sit in these spaces, these administrators have the potential to, number one, it creates a space where we're all just human beings and we can see one another. And I can see you and you can see me. That eliminates this fence that makes you the other on the other side of the fence, which is something that basically makes you an enemy. And then we can empathize with one another. I, as a convict who's incarcerated, I can begin to look at my own stuff and see that you just have a job to do. And you're just trying to feed your family. And all you want is safety. You want the same things that I want. So I can see that in you, and you can begin to see the places in me where I'm wounded and how I wound up where I'm at. And you can understand the reality of my situations, because prisons, at least in America, I haven't seen the ones here in Holland yet, at least in America, are some pretty brutal places.
Of course.
And when the administrators are aware of their own stuff and they are aware of their own complicitness in the system, then they start to come from a place in which you just modeled, okay, well, what do? I can't change the entire system, but is there a responsibility? Is there something for me here to do? Okay, I will do this. And they begin to move from that place. He spoke about, you know, the jail and the sheriff, you know, being in there and those men holding him. Some of those men holding him hadn't showered in over 9 days because of the conditions in the jail.
Yeah.
And they had been pepper sprayed. So they still had pepper spray in their bodies, but had the ability to connect to the compassion to see him in his hurt, to see him in his burden and hold him. And then he could make a connection, and then he could see his response. Get this man a shower right now.
Yeah. Nice.
That's how it works.
Yeah. So you're now this year, 10 years out of prison.
Yes.
Are you in a certain way grateful of the time in prison?
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Without a doubt, I'm
Okay.
I'm grateful for my time in prison, because the time that I spent in prison is the reason why I know you. I have the miracle of sitting in space with you. The time in prison, without the time in prison, my ego can't identify how I get to this place, how I get to the place where I have tapped into my capacity to love and to care and to have the call, the willingness to answer the call to do this work wherever it's needed.
It was all necessary, yeah.
I had to go to prison in order for that to happen. That was what Spirit had in store for me. A part of my surrender is recognizing that I had to be molested on that couch as a part of providing me the capacity to understand why I'm here. Yeah. The things that have happened to me in my life that the ego can tell me are crimes against me, or places where I was victimized, or things that should have not happened, or things that should have happened. I've developed a relationship with Spirit and surrendered into Spirit. Identified long before I got here that I would be someone who would be given the capacity to carry those things, so that I could go into places where people believe that they cannot hold those things and they cannot find a way through those things. And then I can show it's possible. Yeah. You can do this.
What a spirit, yeah. I have to go to the bathroom. And there are some questions. The reason, well, that's all, like you said before, it has to be this way. You are sitting here at the table is like a guy I met in a really strange, nice place. It's called Eric. And he just had a study with you. He made up some questions. Like I'm going to pick one of that questions.
Okay.
But first, do you want something?
Bathroom break, folks.
Well, this is okay. I don't know if you have an answer of this, but it's it's about masculine and feminine energies. Are there differences in how men and women approach healing? And what can they learn from each other?
I believe my experience is that the differences in how men and women approach healing comes about when they are approaching it in separate spaces. My experience is that when we are doing the work in the same spaces, the approach is exactly the same, and it's actually more potent. Because unfortunately, a lot of women have wounds, and their healing is not all, but a lot of women, their wounds and healing is around the masculine. Yeah. And there are a lot of men and males whose wounding is around the feminine. And so when you have spaces where it's just men and they're working and wounds come up around, a mother that was absent, or a mother that was emasculating, or a mother who's, who used her son to fulfill the space that a man would have filled relationship wise, then you got a bunch of men trying to find how to hold that energy and how to hold that space. And symbolically, it does work. It can, have a sense of healing. And I have seen it be so much more potent when you have women there And I have seen the work be so much more potent and effective when we can see one another doing the work, so that men can experience women's pain and really see how deep they hurt when I show up in a fucked up way as a man.
But maybe you have to do it in steps to first create like a safe space. No?
Well, yeah, you have to create the safe space. And that is one of the steps, is creating the container. And it doesn't matter if it's just men doing it, you know, together, or if it's just women. Those are one of the steps. But we have to see each other. We have to witness each other in our hurt, in our pain, in order to really heal. Because women, a lot of women, not all, I'm not generalizing here. Don't run me out of the human race. Women traditionally in this society, as James said, in a patriarchal society, the stereotype is that men are strong and that men don't hurt and men deal with things in a different way. So women don't get the opportunity to see the little boy that was hurt in a man. Women don't get the opportunity to see the pain that men carry, and women don't get the opportunity to see men step into owning responsibility around their shadows and begin to move into a place and be open to hearing from the feminine what the impact is and what would be in service of them. I don't know naturally how to treat a woman unless a woman communicates to me and teaches me how to treat a woman. If it's just left up to me, then I have an imprint or a belief about how a woman is supposed to be treated. And that's probably not going to be right. And vice versa, woman to man. So we need to be, in order to really heal and become a community, a healthy community, we got to do this work together.
Nice.
Yeah, I co-sign what Eldra's saying. Both when I was doing clinical work as well as this kind of work, my job was to follow the individual, whether it was a man or a woman. And so there have been conditioning that the woman has gotten around being a woman, and there's been conditioning around what a man is supposed to look like. And my job is to notice when that conditioning is happening and call attention to the conditioning, not change the way the work is done, but calling attention to being aware of what might be different or what might be expressed that a woman expresses and possibly a man doesn't. And yet that doesn't really hold water. I can't generalize on that because there are a lot of men who have a lot of femininity that they're expressing. And so there is no one size fits all. The caveat, I would say, is I want men to do their work first before, and women as well, before putting them into the container together.
Yeah, that's what I...
because there is, when intimacy is created, into me see, there's a real familiarity.
Oh, wow. Into me see.
Yes. There's a real vulnerability. And if I am not aware of how my shadow can take advantage of that vulnerability, then I'm going to perpetrate unbeknownst to me. And it might be communal because the woman might be needy and think she needs that attention because she didn't get it somewhere in her life. So she's going to get it wherever she can. And so once those shadows have been somewhat looked at by the individual, then there can be some responsibility and awareness within the individual. And then the facilitator, we can just follow the process and hold people accountable to that.
Great, guys, what you are doing, what do you hope listeners will take away?
I'm going to say that they hear hear us, and they hear something that resonates with them, that creates a call, so that the next opportunity they can grow and learn and be in communion and witness and unpack, they'll take that opportunity. So for me, it doesn't get much simpler than that.
No, but well, it's really big, but it's simple and great as well. Yeah.
For me, what I hope your listeners would take away from today is to begin to look at the question around what prisons do they create for themselves?
Yeah.
And in looking at that, take it one step further. Is that working for me? And if it's not, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be and how do I want to show up? Now, that's a lot, but there's a big responsibility because we're running around willy-nilly, having children, bringing them into a fucked up world.
Yeah.
And what am I doing to contribute to moving the world into a better place?
Yeah. What do you guys think of death? Are you afraid?
No. Death is a part of life. Do I want to die? I'm not looking to die tomorrow.
No.
You know, I'd love to stay here as long as possible and as long as it brings value.
Yeah.
But I'm not afraid of death. It's a part of life. I've already lived 15 lifetimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me. I'm not afraid of death.
No.
Either. I am afraid that if I haven't been true to my pies, that I haven't done what I should have done.
No.
And that's what I'm really afraid of. And now there's this finality of death and I can't do a makeup or a do-over.
No. And what do you think will happen? Of course, we don't know. But, well, you, James, you were involved with a lot of indigenous people, you told us. So they have thoughts about this as well. What do you think that will happen?
Well, as a scientist, I believe matter is neither created nor destroyed. Just gets transmuted.
Yeah.
In the spiritual sense, I still feel my wife. She passed 4 years ago.
Okay.
And she still talks to me and she's still present. So is that a trick of my mind? Or am I actually feeling it so deeply and it's resonating and it's palpable that there is something to the fact that her spirit is around? So I don't know that there's a resort area, heaven that you go to if you're good. And I don't believe that there's a slum you go to if you're bad, right?
Exactly.
I just believe that something is going on and maybe those two things are possible that I just mentioned.
And how do you want to be remembered? James Mcleary.
Well, I think I get that every time I go to a training because we have something called the sovereign hot seat, and you sit there and everybody who's participated in the circle feeds their reflections back on what they've gotten from you. So, my recall is that people say that I'm safe. People say that I'm powerful. People say that I'm kind. People say that I am diligent around serving and supporting their needs. And people say that they're safe. So, I mean, that could be written in a couple of sentences in a eulogy.
Yeah.
Versus, all the credentials and whatnot that I have, right? So that's how I'd like to be remembered. And I keep getting that over and over and over every time I go to a training.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And for you, how do you want to be remembered? Eldra Jackson Dr.
He did right by his kids.
Well, that resonates for me even more than a few months ago. So, yeah, man, I hope you feel as proud and as great as James was saying, powerful. And I really felt safe here. And It gave me a lot of inspiration. Thank you so much for your time and again, what you are doing for the world.
Can I say one more thing? I want to give a shout out to Michael and Eileen and Jupe and Christiane and Hank. You know, those folks are the reason we're sitting here together today. You know, without their efforts and without their energy and without their commitment to this mission and without their commitment to bringing this work to the Netherlands and taking it inside, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. So I really want people to hear those names and know that, and Peter, and know that, and anybody else that whose name I may not have said is not out of disrespect or belittlement. It's just out of, it's not coming to my mind right now. There's a group of individuals, but I want this to be a part of the historical canon that marks when this started in the Netherlands and who was there, because it can be very easy for folks to forget that and for folks to fall into, oh, well, I didn't do anything, that sort of thing. I'm putting them names out there. They were at the ground floor. They were the foundation and are a seminal part of bringing this movement to the Netherlands.
Laat ik dan ook eventjes echt noemen de Inside Circle, de justitiële instellingen, Mankind Project Nederland, Mannenkracht en Hero's Journey. Those are the names of the companies, the organizations behind this. And well, in a certain way, they ask me, can I try something? Which is like a sentence you guys are really familiar with. And I'm so glad we did. Thank you so much again.
Oh, sure.
You're welcome and thank you for having us.
En jij bedankt voor het luisteren. Ik ben benieuwd hoe deze geraakt heeft. The whole English thing wasn't a thing. It was like a connection.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Jij bedankt voor het luisteren. Dit was KUKURU. Tot de volgende. Zonnegroet. Hoi.